Hi everyone, this is Nicola Ducharme here, the Naturopathic Mama. So I wanted to talk today a little bit about heavy metal testing. This is a conversation that came up with me and some of my mommy friends the other day, and so I was sharing some information with them, and I thought, well, you know what, let me share this to the whole community because it's a big topic, and so I think it's worthwhile to talk about the different options. So heavy metal toxicity is a fairly significant issue. It can impact our children, it can impact ourselves. And so knowing how to test accurately for heavy metals is an important component. So in standard sort of allopathic Western medicine, the standard testing for heavy metals is a blood test. And certainly I know for my daughter, who's actually here home, I hope she's over there on the couch on the iPad, so we'll have to just hope that she stays happy over there. But you know, they do the standard lead testing before they start school and all of that stuff. They actually do that through a blood draw. But here's the problem with blood testing for heavy metals. Unless it's an acute exposure, or unless levels are so crazy high, they just won't show up in the blood. And the reason for that is that the heavy metals in the blood don't stay around forever. They stay in the bloodstream for 6 to 8 weeks, but then they're taken up into the tissues. And so with some of our kiddos with, behavioral issues, learning difficulties, autism spectrum disorders, whatever the case may be, a lot of the manifestation is neurological. In adults, we see that it can also cause body pain, arthritis, joint pain, muscle pain. Certainly neurological issues too, but it tends to manifest more as like Parkinson's, dementia, Alzheimer's, things like that. And so it's really important to have an accurate way to test. So I'm not a big fan of blood testing. There are some cases where blood testing is appropriate. Certainly if, like I said, acute exposure or for an initial screen, but it's not the most effective way in my opinion. So the second option there is hair analysis. And there are some good labs. I use Great Plains Labs a lot that do hair testing for heavy metals, and they also will typically test the hair then for minerals. I feel like this is a bit of a flawed system, and I'll tell you why. So in a hair sample, especially I've done this a lot with little tiny kiddos, in a hair sample, there are a couple of things that can go wrong. One is contamination, which is probably more relevant to adults who may color their hair or use styling products or different shampoos that may have different compounds in that can trigger a false positive result. But the biggest problem for me with hair analysis is you can look at the results with opposing arguments. And let me explain that a little bit better. So back in the day when I was working mostly with autism, which was like 2003 to 2005 or 2006, I was certified as a DAN doctor, which means Defeat Autism Now. That certification is sort of outdated and there's a new organization now. But back in the day, we were DAN doctors. And so we were doing a lot of heavy metal testing and a lot of chelation with kids that had accumulated metals through vaccines or environmental sources. Here's where I struggled. So I'd go to DAN conferences and these very, very well-respected and well-known doctors, who I frankly have tremendous respect for as well, were presenting their data. And they'd put a sample of a lab test up on the board, up on the PowerPoint. And if the levels of mercury and lead coming out in the hair was super duper high, they'd say, wow, look how metal toxic this child is. Look how much mercury and lead is coming out in their hair. Okay, fair enough. That seems to make sense. So then the next practitioner or the next presenter would put a PowerPoint up and say, look, this child's hair analysis shows there's no mercury coming out. Therefore, they can't excrete. Therefore, they're heavy metal toxic. So in my head, I'm sort of thinking, okay, well, I see that makes sense. But here we are with a lab test that opposing results, we're making the same argument. And that's that was the disconnect for me. I sort of thought, oh, okay, that doesn't make sense, right? We can't say If the levels are high, there's a problem. If the levels are low, there's a problem. Because while those two things may be true, that still doesn't give the information of what it is for that individual. So the hair test is limited. Now, I still do hair analysis in little kiddos, right? So probably up until, certainly the 2, 3, 4-year-olds, probably up until 5, I would still choose to do hair analysis. But we just have to recognize that it's not 100% reliable. And we have to take those levels in the context of everything else going on for that child. What I do like about the hair test is it does show some of the minerals, and I have assessed many children who are deficient in lithium because they had 0 in their hair while their other minerals were pretty well regulated. And so nutritional levels of lithium can be amazing for children, and just, feeding their brain and helping them with neurological development. So it does help to identify some of those factors. I'm not saying it's a bad test. I'm just saying it has its limitations. In a little kiddo, 3, 4, 5, 2, 3, 4, it may still be the best option, but for anything 5 and above, it's not my first choice. So then what my first choice is a provoked urine test. And I want to point out that the urine is a filtration of the blood. Okay, so whatever's running around in the bloodstream, the kidneys then sort of filter that out. It's one of our detox mechanisms. Filter out the blood, and whatever it wants to dump out shows up in the urine. So remember what I said before about if heavy metals, they don't run around in the bloodstream for more than 6 to 8 weeks. They get taken up into the tissues. So when the kidneys filter the blood, unless it's acute, it's not going to show up there either. Okay, so what we do to get around that is to do what we call a provocation. And that means we give a dose of a chelating agent to prod the metals out of the tissues into the bloodstream so that the kidneys can filter it and it shows up in the urine. And to me, that is the most effective heavy metal test there is. Now, it's not a perfect science. It doesn't give a reading of what's in the body. No test gives a reading of what is actually in the body. But what I like about it is if there's more in the body, then more will dump out with that provocation. Okay, so the higher levels we see with the provoked urine test is a good reflection of what's in the body. And if you ask, how do I know this? I know this because I've run hundreds of these tests. And what I do then is, as I'm working with someone on chelation, I recheck every 2 to 3 months. And we use the exact same provoking dose that we used from the get-go for consistency. And as we detox heavy metals, I see less showing up with the provocation. So it does show me that there's a good correlation between how much is in the body when we provoke, how much gets dumped out into the urine. So, and I typically provoke with DMSA. I use 2,000 milligrams with my adult patients, and then kiddos are dosed depending on their weight. So it's very appropriate to their weight. And for me, that is really the most effective way to assess heavy metal toxicity. And people have said to me, well, won't I feel wretched if I do a big dose of DMSA? Or what about if I'm mobilizing heavy metals and they get reabsorbed into the system? There's a lot of talk about reabsorption of heavy metals, but you've got to realize that if you are provoking and it's showing up in the urine, it means the kidneys are doing their job of clearing it. Okay, so a lot of heavy metals clear through the kidneys, some clear through the bowel. I have been really surprised how few people have had sort of detoxy kinds of feelings after doing that provoked heavy metal test. And I'll be honest with you, I thought more people would. I remember one time, this is my own stuff, but I got super high in heavy metals. I was not eating any chicken or any meat. I was eating tons of fish, measured my heavy metals. They were through the roof. So I thought, oh, I'll just get in and do some IV EDTA because, I was working in a clinic that did IVs. It was easy. and I'm fairly, I'm not a sensitive constitution with stuff. I can usually, give myself hefty doses of things and not flinch. I was so ill that night. I came home, everything hurt. I had headaches, my muscles hurt. I remember laying on my bed going, oh my gosh, this is how my Lyme patients feel every day. It was shocking. I couldn't even get up and feed my own dogs. Like, it was shocking. And that was because I did too much of a chelating dose in one hit, mobilized too many metals. But the fact of the matter is, you have to mobilize them and get them out. Now, there are things you can do to circumvent that. And so if I have a really sensitive patient who doesn't feel like they could tolerate the full dose or is afraid of doing the full dose of a chelator, we can do a half dose. We can do a quarter dose. I mean, recognizing that we're not going to get the full benefits in the results, but there are ways to mitigate it. The other thing I tell people is, at the end of the 6-hour urine collection, which is what the urine test is, take a bunch of activated charcoal, chlorella. I mean, there are binders that you can do that help to bind those heavy metals in the gut. I have a product that Research Nutritionals makes that I love called Metal Pull. And it has cilantro, which is a natural chelator, has some garlic, has chlorella. And it's a brilliant thing just as a follow-up to help bind excess DMSA, excess heavy metals, and pull them out of the body. But at the end of the day, we have to mobilize them to get them out. You can't sort of just sit there and say, look, I don't want to mobilize any heavy metals because I feel like that could be, dangerous, or it could create side effects. If heavy metals are coming out, heavy metals are coming out. The key is to support the detoxification of the body and to use binders so that there is no reabsorption from the gut. You're binding the heavy metals and getting them out of the system. So just in summary, the best test for me is the provoked heavy metal test. I use doctors' data. It is not an expensive test, which is a blessing because a lot of the private labs are testing is expensive. It's not an expensive test. DMSA now, sadly, is prescription. So we send it to a compounding pharmacy, which does mean you need a doctor's sign off, which I hate because DMSA used to be an over-the-counter supplement. But just recognize that, if you have a tiny baby and you're looking for heavy metal issues, then yeah, maybe in that case, the most appropriate way is to do a hair test because it's not invasive. Babies don't have dyed hair or don't have chemicals in their hair, so there's less chance of contamination. So up until about age 5, that's what I still recommend. But kids 5 and older, I try to do the provoked urine. Like I said, we dose the DMSA based on body weight, collect urine for 6 hours afterwards, and then we can use binders and just help with, extra glutathione and NRF2 activators and all the detox tools we have to help clear that from their system. But I just wanted to let you guys know, I mean, I feel like the blood test is appropriate. I see my little one. I'm still on a video, Valentina. Yeah. The blood test is appropriate when there's an acute exposure, but it's just not my first choice. So I hope that's helpful to you. Feel free to message me if you have any questions. I do think the provoked urine test is the gold standard of what I use in my office. Well, you know what? The naturopathic mama is a mama, and here's her child. Valentina, do you want to come say hi really quickly before we come here?
Please.
Wait, come here and be very, very quiet. All right, guys. So you know that I have a beautiful daughter, and here she is. Her name is Valentina. Normally she's at school on Fridays, but today it's, I don't know, professional development day or something.
I have no idea.
So here she is. This is Valentina. So, okay.
And I have rosy pink cheeks.
You have rosy pink cheeks because you're a healthy girl. All right. Thank you. So that's about all the information I have for you. Oh, God. Valentina. Stop.
Ow.
Okay.
Ow, you're hurting my ribs.
Oh, sorry, boo. Sorry. Okay. So I'm about to be mauled by my daughter. So I'm going to sign off now. Yeah, thank you. I'm going to sign off now. But anyway, I hope before I got distracted, this provided some value, and let me know if you have any questions. All right, everyone. See you later. Bye. Say bye, Valentina.
Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.